Okay. Let's turn to 697 and sing the first and last verses of The Way of the Cross Leads Home. That's a perfect song for my message. Let's stand as we sing. 697. Thank you. You may be seated. Let me say welcome to everyone. I know we had somebody said, where was everyone this morning? We had our band was at Nag's Head for the traditional. They've been going there for a number of years, marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade down there. And so that I think the bus has just pulled back in, so they're just now getting back into town. And our scouts were out and going to camp out this weekend. The Girl Scout moms and the girls were on that was some interesting pictures, but I saw where a couple of our moms had survived it and had gotten back. So we did have, and we have others that are just out of town for different reasons. So, but it was funny. I want you to know this. Even though we thought our numbers were off, I want you to understand that this morning in Sunday school, we had 91 more than we had a year ago. 91 more. But if you remember, we didn't have Sunday school a year ago today. It was our first anniversary, and we started. Sorry about that. But that's the truth. We had 91 in Sunday school today, more than we had last year. That's where you just stop and don't tell nobody we didn't have Sunday school a year ago today. Anyway. Well, I'm just trying to be a blessing. But anyway, I'm glad that you're here tonight. The announcements, we're getting busy. And Tuesday night, or tomorrow night, we still are going to have Sounds of Praise rehearsal tomorrow. It's not in the bulletin, but we are going to have it. Tuesday night at 7, the Ladies League will meet. Wednesday night at 5:30 is our Wednesday night supper. Team 2 serving, and at 7 is our prayer service and Bible study, youth meetings, and choir rehearsal. Thursday morning, the Senior Fellowship will meet, and 7 o'clock Thursday night, Circle of Joy meets. Let me back up to the Thursday morning meeting, because a number of you are here. And so I have to apologize. I tried to get our tickets this afternoon for the Easter performance on the 22nd, and they're not available. So I waited too late. They're already sold out, so we will not be able to go. And I apologize for that. I would not have thought one of the first performances, it was only the second performance, and I would not have thought that would have been sold out on a Tuesday. But anyway. So I apologize for that. That's one road trip we will not take. We'll go somewhere else and aggravate somebody if you want to, but we just can't do that. Then Saturday, our Spring Bazaar. It's coming quickly, and it's going to be a big deal. We've got a lot of yard sale stuff. We've got 12 vendors. We've got food. We've got all kinds of stuff. We got the Humane Society that's going to be here with cute little animals that need to be adopted and all that kind of stuff. So, and also a rabies clinic. I think they're setting up a drive-through. Just drive through with your animal, they'll pop it with the rabies shot and send you on your way. So that's all that stuff's being lined up, and they met this afternoon to pull all that together. So, what? Are you laughing? You're laughing. Private joke. Okay. I'll hear about it later, I guess. So, remember all of these things that are happening and come be a part of it. Don't forget to start bringing your candy for our Easter egg hunt. Our young people put that in the Wednesday before, so they're going to be putting it in on the Wednesday night, the 23rd, I think would be the date. So we need to get it here, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. So go ahead and start bringing it. We can store it. It has to be inspected by some of us who are in charge to make sure that the big stuff can't go into the eggs and that kind of thing. So get that to us. And our Easter egg hunt is on the Saturday before Easter at 10 o'clock that morning. So please remember that. I have not spoken with the Leggett family today. And so I have not heard any. They had promised that they would let me know if there was any, change or anything. I'm assuming that he continues to start regaining his strength. He is having physical therapy. He had some yesterday. So the quest is now beginning to find him a bed in Greenville so that they can move him back east. But Robert is not in ICU anymore. He is in a private room, so we're glad for that. And I didn't see Miss Annie this afternoon, so I don't know how ornery she is or still how ill she is about being a patient in the hospital. Did you see her, Murdy? Well, you just have to be careful, because if you didn't want to go right after lunch, because she would have had some utensils. She would have hurt you. But she's not thrilled about being in the hospital. She is not a good patient. I think we all know that about Amy. She don't like hospitals. But she has a touch of pneumonia. She's in room 247 at Martin. So we want to remember her. She was. But that's because you brought her 2 Bojangle biscuits or something. She knows I'm going to pick her. I told her I was going to stand right up in front of the church and tell every one of them she was just as ornery as a hickory nut. Just as hard-headed. And she didn't put me down because she knew it was true. Any other prayer requests tonight? Yes, Martin knows it. I know. Hers is still in the testing and diagnostic stage. We're still trying to figure out why she's having such discomfort. Everyone in prayer. Yes, they just got back from urgent care. And some of our folks is coming down with this stuff. So we need prayers. Curtis, would you lead us tonight? I did forget to mention the letter from Gary and Gail about the progress of Pam and the good news there. We read that this morning, so remember that. That is one of our praise items. And Keith, I'm going to ask you and Curtis if you would to serve as ushers. Father, as you bless us, we live in joy. Thanking you for all the many ways that you make our lives good and meaningful. And we respond by seeking to be obedient in the giving and returning of the tithe and bringing our offerings to pray for wisdom and guidance in their use through this church. Christ we pray. This is the fifth Sunday of Lent, the last Sunday of Lent, as next Sunday is Palm Sunday. And I thought it might be fitting to talk about the way of the cross, the way to the cross. And I got in here and got working feverishly as a result of a conversation that my wife and I had this afternoon. She came in and she hands me these papers. She says, I want you to read this and tell me if you don't think this would be good to send to Seth. And I started reading, and I started reading, and I was trying to read, and it was about as exciting as, I don't know, an endoscopy, I guess. I just could not pick up on what was so profound about this thing, this story. And so she proceeded to explain to me. Well, you got to read the beginning. It's the big picture. It's the whole background and the story so that you understand the story behind the song. And so the words, and I kept reading as I said. So I'm going to start my message out this way. If you have somebody trying to explain something to you or to share something very important, sometimes you can't see exactly or get a hold of exactly what kind of picture this person is trying to present. So you sit there and you have to sit back and get the big picture. You have to kind of just back up, look at the whole story, and then after we get the big picture, then we can better focus on the main points that are trying to be made. So I thought about that in that little lesson my wife taught me this afternoon. And I thought I'd try to apply that to the way of the cross, or the way to the cross. You know, the whole story with Jesus can be summed up in this little phrase. He loves you, he loves me. You know, that's basically the story. We're all sinners. Without Christ, we're doomed. We're doomed to a Christless eternity. And as we consider what we opened up the service with singing about, the way of the cross leads home, I want you to consider, I want tonight to just go over the big picture. Sometimes we focus so much on just the Easter story. Sometimes we pick up our focus on Palm Sunday, or maybe we'll back up as far as the baptism during Lent. But we focus, it's like, gee, the whole Easter story is wrapped around palms being waved and crying in a garden, and then a mistaken arrest, and but we don't get the whole picture. You see, what Jesus did on the cross for you and for me was not an afterthought. It was not something that was, well, I'm going to take the circumstance that I'm in and still let my Father's will be done. No, it wasn't that way. I don't believe the Bible teaches that. It certainly was not a knee-jerk reaction on the part of our Lord. In fact, I think the opposite is true. I think that this whole thing was just a part of God's creative purposes. and a part of his plan. All of us have sinned and come short of God's glory. And the psalmist reminds us in the Psalms that we were born dead to our trespasses and our sins. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:22 that we were all destined to die and to go into an eternity without Jesus Christ because we were all in Adam's sin. Just as Adam sinned and became separated from God and thrown out of the garden, that's where the big picture began. And that's what I want to do tonight. I want to take a little journey to the cross. To cover my bases for the next few weeks, okay? The journey to the cross was started before the world began. Look at the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 1. That in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. Then turn all the way back to where I want to start tonight. To Genesis chapter 22. And look at two little verses. Verse 13 and verse 14. I'm going to start with John 1:1, but I want to go ahead and read verses 13 and 14 of Genesis chapter 22. They say, Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. And to this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Now that's the text for tonight, but you go back to the very beginning. You see, the journey to the cross started before the world even began, just like John chapter 1, verse 1 says. And to me, that is such an amazing fact. Way, way, way back in the beginning, God always was because he always is. That sounds like a crazy phrase. And it's hard for us to wrap ourselves around that. It's so hard to comprehend because we are so limited by time and space. We just can't wrap ourselves around. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And it became flesh and dwelt among us. We can't wrap that around us. But John tells us that before time even began, God always was. Now, some people use the old-fashioned way back, or now they'll say back in the day, or they'll do like my wife says, and way back when you used to be young, back in the day. We got all kinds of phrases for trying to walk back in time, but none of those phrases even come close to describing the eternity of an eternal God. The incredible truth is, way back then, there was still the Word. And the Word was Jesus. And Jesus was not only with God way back then, but he was God. And to me, what that means is that now we have, because of that reality, we can now understand how it is that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself. When we understand that in the beginning was God, then we can wrap this thing about reconciling himself. And Jesus frequently reminded his disciples that he was what? I am the Father. If you've seen the Father, you've seen me. So the cross was not an afterthought. It had to be a part of the very beginning. Because the Word was in the beginning. So you start way back there. The journey begins in Genesis. Now the second thing is our text tonight. The sacrifice of Isaac. We love this little story. We all know this story. It's just a beautifully epic account of a couple that was so old and had wanted children for all of their lives. They wanted a child of their own. And there's so many lessons to be learned from their struggles, and especially their efforts when they decided to take matters in their own hand. Someone would argue today that the big mess we've got in the first place is Abraham's fault with the world's problems, because it goes all the way back to Ishmael. And I don't know about that, but that's just, I guess, the way the family tree goes all the way back. But the point is that they even tried to take matters in their own hands, but God kept his promise. You know, and sin has such consequences. And I like to use the story of David and King David when it comes to sin and its consequences, even more so than Abraham. You know, when he gave her maidservant to him and Ishmael was born, they realized that this was walking out of what God wanted. This wasn't the way God planned it all. But to me, even an even better story is David and his misgivings before God. And they say, how can a man who would go and commit adultery like that, how can a man who would go and even have this woman's husband put on the front line so that he would of certainty be killed in battle, how can a man like that be called a man after God's own heart? Because he was. And he loved God immensely, and God forgave him, but he still suffered consequences. That's a story that I always love to share with teenagers, because to help them understand every decision you make has a consequence. And for 95% of them during your life, those consequences are good and they're positive. But there are those times when we make bad decisions. Well, because, and the only way we can get around that is to understand simply that God is the only one that is perfect in his way and always right. And he always keeps his promises. He had made a promise to Abraham, and he kept it. So when Abraham was told to go and sacrifice his son, think about it. Just look at this picture. Moments before Abraham would have brought that knife down into the chest of his son, God intervened and provided a ram of perfect, without blemish, perfection for sacrifice. And so there he is. In the midst of our sin, in the midst of our inability to make good decisions all the time, in the midst of our trying to take matters into our own hands, God intervened with the perfect sacrifice, just as he did for Abraham. It goes back that far. His perfect sacrifice for you and for me on the cross was his son. And then we can move over a little further and get to the prophets. I like Isaiah. There's a lot of places, but I like Isaiah 55, verses 6 and 7, because they remind us, this all was blessed by the Father. It was for, he was told, we were told in Isaiah 55, starting with verse 6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked change their ways and banish the very thought of doing things that are wrong. Let them turn to the Lord that he may have mercy on them. Yes, turn to our God, for he will forgive generously. You see, this was spoken of by the prophets. They were men of God, and they foretold many great and wonderful things from the heart of God. And in many instances, they spoke God's truth to those in their time who needed to know what God had to say for them. And they became spokesmen and prophesied concerning things to come. And they often told of a holy and a righteous God and what he had in store for mankind. We say, well, we're used to that. We understand that. But you got to put yourself again in their sandals, because back then, way back in that day, these people had God in a box. He was at that certain place of worship. He could only be seen at certain times of sacrifice. They had to go to a temple, and they had to approach God through a high priest. And here's Isaiah, way back in the day, trying to let the people know that God was not only able to be found, but he was also able to be called upon. See, they felt like they had to take a journey and go to the place where God was, in the Holy of Holies. Then only the high priest could experience him. And Isaiah is trying to say, no. Seek the Lord. He can be found. Call upon him. He's near. We were told way back then that God could be found. And all of this was made possible through the fulfillment of such words by Jesus on the cross. So then we can turn over to the New Testament. We can look in the second chapter of Luke and witness this wonderful incarnation event. This wonderful event. Jesus, born in Bethlehem of the Virgin Mary and announced by the angels as the Savior of the world. And everything that took place around that manger pointed to everything that everyone and anyone who ever needs or whoever has a need for their entire life is pointed to that every need right there around that manger. And this is the place where we start to see, you know, in our Christian understanding. We struggle with the Old Testament. But this is where we start seeing. I don't think anybody looked in that manger that night, in that cave, in that stable, in the outskirts of Bethlehem, and saw someone that was getting ready to, at some point later in their life, die and go to a cross. Or go to a cross and die, excuse me. I don't think anybody saw that. But it was all right there. You know, we see what we want to see. A lot of times we hear what we want to hear. It's strange. There's places in the Bible where it tells us and tries to teach us not to mourn for those who die in the Lord, right? Because they've gone to a reward. They've gone to an eternal bliss. And we're told, don't mourn for them. We got it backwards. We turn around and we get all joyous and everything when children come into the world and they say, mourn for them because they've come into such an evil place. So I find it intriguing that on the night Christ was born, they said, rejoice. The angels rejoiced with exceeding joy. Why that sounds contradictory to what the scriptures teach about that? Why? Maybe it's because the heavens knew the eternal purpose of the birth. Maybe they knew that the eternal joy would be the salvation of man. That's why John 3:16 says, so loved the world. Even the angels in heaven couldn't help but praise it. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. Right there in verse 7 or 4. But this is Jesus, born so that he might continue that journey to the cross. And then the last little thing that I think that points to the cross, and I'm done, is how God blessed this whole thing. To me, and it was on the day of the baptism. I'm looking at Mark 1:11. A lot of people ask, why was Jesus baptized? When we say that baptism, number one, has no saving value, not going to save you. When we say it's an outward expression of, but he had no sin to be washed away. There was no newness to be raised to. He was the epitome of perfection. So why? And maybe there's a lot of reasons. Maybe we could have a very intriguing dialogue one Wednesday night and talk about stuff like this. I think there are a lot of reasons. Perhaps the fact that everything he did was designed to show believers what we needed to do in order to have said relationship with him. That just might have a little bit to do with it. But you see, I think the great important thing that happened on the baptism had nothing to do with John, had nothing to do with sandals that he wasn't worthy to unlace, had nothing to do with his cousin Jesus that was coming down and said, look, no, I don't you baptize me. This is the way it needs to be for now. Yeah, I think the important thing is what happened after John lifted him up from the water. Because that's when God manifested himself and spoke from heaven, and he affirmed his son. This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. He affirmed his son. And that tells me that everything that we know about God has to come through his son. Walk it backwards if you want to. Understand how it prophetically weaves a wonderful story, whatever. But this is why Jesus came to this earth, to die on the cross. So that we might know his Father. That we might have the assurance of knowing him and spending eternity with him. He is the only way, because he is the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father except by me. That is why we take, that is why he took, that is why we take the journey to the Father. So you can go way on back yonder with my wife if you want to, to as early a day as you get. And we can walk it all the way back to Genesis. But I would leave you with this. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life, and that you might have life abundantly. To me, the thing that concerned Jesus the most was how we live, not how we live. Yes, he's concerned about the state of our heart. Yes, that will have to be dealt with. But his concern is that the state of that heart be dealt with in our living, and the outgrowth of that change of our heart be how we live. Go ahead and do your research. There's a whole lot more said about living life abundant and living joyously in his name than there is about hell. I just think it's simply because he wanted us to live for him so that we wouldn't have to worry about dying in Christ. Because if you live for him, you will. So that's your journey. And next Sunday night, we will not have services here. We'll leave here probably about 7. The message of Easter starts at 8 o'clock. And so I think the consensus of the board remind me, guys, it was to leave at 7. And there is a sheet out there if you want to ride the bus. You just sign the sheet so that they'll know who to look for on the bus, and so that we don't leave anybody. But you're welcome to ride. We plan to make the bus and the van available for anyone that wants to go as a group and enjoy the fellowship. But next Sunday, we're planning to be at Piney Grove for the Message of Easter presentation. We plan to take our young people there, and everyone is invited to be a part of that. So, and then the following Sunday night, we will not have any services here. It is Easter Sunday. We don't have evening worship on Easter. And then the first Sunday night in April is going to be a youth Sunday night of singing and music and talent that Adam's going to be in charge of. And then the second Sunday night in April, Diamond City will be here with Bobby Cherry and their group. They've gotten back together, and they'll be here for a service of gospel music on the second Sunday night in April. So plans have been made that far ahead. And so I hope you'll mark your calendars. We'll try to keep everybody up to date on all of the things that are being planned. Thank you for coming. Let's stand and meet us. Lord Stallings, would you dismiss us, please?